Hi everyone, Xanthony A12 Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it is time for a review of the new Umbra Vitae record, Shadow of Life. Umbra Vitae is a supergroup of sorts who have been turning heads in the music scene due to their connections to 100 Demons, Hatebreed, Twitching Tongues, The Red Chord, Converge, Even Job for a Cowboy, and Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, which is a really interesting series of bands to have connections to before starting a new group. But I think one could make a pretty educated guess as to what genre they might be dabbling in. I'd say it's about a 99.9999999% chance it's going to be metalcore. So yes, a group of guys with a lot of metalcore in their background started a metalcore band, but this band also adopts a style that has undergone quite a bit of change over the past decade, and that's deathcore. The primal and breakdown heavy hybrid of death metal and metalcore that peaked commercially in the 2000s and now is more varied than it's ever been, as you have a lot of groups these days going progressive with the style, complete with gent guitar riffs and super slick production, thinking of bands like The Contortionist, as well as Born of Osiris, whose album covers literally look like galaxy brain memes. You have other strains that have been popping up over the past 10 years too. Shibalba, who brings doom metal into the fold. Also, Thy Art is Murder, that has a bit of a more of a technical edge. Shadow of Intent, who are one of the more melodic acts on the scene. Though it may be a surprise to anyone who might usually avoid anything labeled as deathcore, the genre is not nearly as homogenized as it used to be. It's certainly worth giving another shot, especially if you're the type of person who might have heard Job for a Cowboy back in the mid-2000s and felt utterly disgusted. That wasn't me though, I loved that shit. So of course I was excited to hear what Umbra's take on this style was going to be, given the variations we've been seeing as of late. But I quickly found the songs on this record don't sound like an entirely new venture, meaning the band is fronted by Jacob Bannon of Converge and also has Kurt Ballou of Converge doing production. And that seems like just enough to make this sound like Converge kind of doing like a death metal thing. Still, having said that, nothing on this record really drags on for too long. Nearly all the tracks here end around or before the 2-minute mark. The 10 tracks in total don't even add up to a full half hour. So this is a pretty blistering listen, everything hitting you very hard, very fast, in a very short period of time. Like the track Return to Zero, which if you listen to that, it will absolutely smother you with layer upon layer of drums and bass and guttural scream vocals. Return to Zero! These portions are segued to and from with these really sticky tremolo pick guitar passages. Also, there's a nice heavy sharp breakdown on this track too. In total, the track is animalistic, it is visceral, it is deafening. It's like a brick to the face. Not the most original writing in the world, but the energy is certainly something to take into account. I was also pretty impressed with the absolutely demented riffs and grooves on Fear is a Fossil, which pairs really well with the monstrous layers of vocals and some of the passages of super sinister guitar leads too. I also want to take note of the track Intimate Inferno, which is one of the more slow-burning songs on the record, a moment with a bit more melody woven into the madness. I love that passage of speedy blast beats that kick this track off and the way they're topped with these very dramatic and somewhat grim tremolo pick guitars and just dissonant groans as well. Though I have to say, I was disappointed to hear the band embrace this all too common deathcore stereotype when they wrote this really great gloomy passage around the midsection and then suddenly transitions it into a slightly slower version without really adding all that much to it.
Shut up, Beta Boy. That part's for the pit. Here.
Well, regardless, the whole record is really destructive sounding. If you're looking for something that is going to melt your face in 26 minutes or less, you might just enjoy this. But for me, the more I listen to this thing, the combination of death metal and Converge style metalcore either started sounding too obvious or like oil and water. Not only that, but there are many passages on this thing where the writing isn't really all that flavorful, like the track Ethereal Emptiness, despite kicking off with these these throttling blast beats and some kind of impressive guitar work, when the track suddenly busts into one of the most generic breakdowns I've heard in the past few years, it warrants a bit of an eye roll. We also have a lot of tiny and short-winded death metal leads and chunky Cro-Magnon guitar riffs on Atheist aesthetic, which I found to be similarly dumbed down and basic. And in its 76-second runtime, I failed to see what Polluted Paradise really brings to this track list that no other song doesn't already to some degree. The song's attention-grabbing, synced-up drum and riff pattern sounds like a watered-down version of what they had already done on Fear is a Fossil. I guess the squealing guitar leads toward the end are pretty interesting, but not enough to make me want to come back. At the very end of the album is where we get its two longest songs, Blood Blossom and Shadow of Life. The former of the two being the most typical piece of deathcore on this entire record, so much so if it weren't for Jacob Bannon's muffled screams all over this track, I would have no leads whatsoever as to who is even involved with this. And while I don't usually endorse the instrumental wankery of a lot of the more technical deathcore bands out there, at least a group in that style would be working more detail into the drums and guitars. Finally, with the closer, we actually get some impressive dynamics being worked into a song spanning past the 3-minute mark. Dramatic and heavy verse riffs on this thing, a lot of grim harmonies too. Bannon's vocals are certainly brutal enough. From here, we transition into an engaging and fluid series of guitar passages and drum patterns, a really cool ghoulish outro solo too. It might be the most metal and anthemic cut on the entire record, and somehow it is the better for it. To sum up my feelings on this record though, it's okay. It's not bad, but not mind-blowing either. Certainly it's novel to hear this group of guys making this type of record, but my interest in this LP doesn't really expand beyond that and a handful of highlights. More often than I expected, the songs on this thing rode the line between being typical and just somewhat boring, which is kind of amazing though, considering how short the record actually is. Feeling a strong 5 to a light 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you should check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, forever.